Hello and welcome to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable, where today we are going to be discussing the new scheme announced by the Government of India for recruitment of the armed forces. I'm talking about the Agnipath scheme. This was announced recently, and according to this scheme, the government is going to be recruiting about 46,000 soldiers, sailors, and airmen annually for the armed forces. And in fact, this is going to replace the other recruitment that takes place. They're aiming at a younger, leaner armed force. The age that they're targeting is 17.5 to 21 years, and the recruitment will be only for a period of 4 years. About 75% of those recruited will then be asked to leave. They will be given a package, also a package of a salary about 11.5 lakhs or so, plus some other perks, but no pensions. 25% of the others who will, of course, will be also kept back in the cadres that they have, recruited in. The process for recruiting will be taken into account. Your education qualifications will be taken into account. We are told it's going to be done on an all India, all class basis. The idea, of course, is one is obvious. You're going to reduce the pension budget. You're going to have a leaner, younger armed force. You're going to have a younger armed force means that is, technologically can handle the weapons of the future warfare. But a lot of other questions come to mind. Is this really needed? Why fix something that's not broken? The army is very crucial for us, so why tinker with it? And also the loyalty factor. When you know you're in the job for just 4 years, then how loyal are you going to be? And also, what happens to those who are not kept back? You're going to be unleashing into the civil services a group of armed, trained personnel. Discussing the pros and cons of this game-changing scheme, I have with me a panel of experts. I have Lieutenant General Vinod Bhatia. He is the former DGMO of the Indian Army and former director at the Center of Joint Warfare Studies. Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, he was the DG ex-infantry and the former Chief of Staff at the 14th Corps. I have Rear Admiral Sudarshan Shrikande, who served in various flag bullets in the Navy and 2 in the Joint HQ. He's currently an adjunct at the faculty of the Naval War College and also at Goa, and he's also the chief editor of the Naval Dispatch. General Bhatia, your first take on the scheme. I've been reading some of the stuff that you've written, but I'll let you tell us about what are your first thoughts.
Thank you, Priya. I think if I may call the Agnipath scheme something like decisions first, discussions later. So that is how I see it. And you have rightly brought out the pros and cons. Now that it's been done, it's been announced, and I firstly wish the scheme success for the sake of the nation, for the sake of the armed forces, for the sake of national security, and for the sake of Agnipath. Though I have my apprehensions, and I will state those apprehensions. First and foremost, now that it is announced, the ownership should not be left to the armed forces. The ownership should be taken by the Government of India. Right now, the problem is that most of the reforms, I have not even talked about transformation, because the first actual transformation is taken place after the CDS. The reforms, the authority rests with the Government of India, the accountability rests with the service chiefs. So that has been the main lacuna. Now, in this case, I hope the ownership and the accountability rests with the government and the authority rests with the armed forces. So that is one way it could succeed. It could succeed. I'm not saying it will succeed. Right? Now, if you look at the whole thing, the concept, what is the felt need to change a functional organization? The armed forces are delivered from 47 onwards till 13th of June or 14th of June and continue to deliver. Irrespective of that, there has been no recruitment in the last 2 years. We face the China threat. The China challenge manifested. It's not, it's always a long-term threat after 62. But it manifested about 2 years ago. And exactly 2 years ago, we had Galwan. So, and we have done well. You think Santosh Babu and his men, if they were tour of duty 4 years, would they sacrifice their lives for the men? I don't think so. They fought for their unit, they fought for their team, they fought for their company, they fought for their comrades, and they inflicted disproportional costs and casualties on the PLA. That is why we did not see any more Galwans happening. Many more Galwans would have happened. We can't, we are soldiers, and any logical man will not believe, or person will not believe that they were the only ones who were armed. They would have armed the primitive methods all along. So that is the people soldier we're talking. Soldier is the strength of the Indian Armed Forces. Sailor, what is the strength of Indian Armed Forces? Today we are degrading that very thing. This is transformative. Definitely transformative. But transformative, why? We need to transform the Indian military from a military force to a military power in keeping with the aspirations of a growing nation, a risen nation, a responsible nation, a global leader. But what is actually happening is the one organization that has delivered Kargil, which has delivered Kailash Ridge, has delivered LAC, the 71 war, you name it. It is called for aid to civil authority at least twice a week, if not more, thrice a week, 150 times the average. And it has stood the test of time. Now you're tinkering with the strength. Many foreign military leaders who come to India, and when they interacted with us, I was also the region friendly like Sanjay Kulkarni. The one thing they want to know is how is the regimental system functioning. Right. Today we quote Israel. Israel's population, Israel is less than Delhi. The threats are different. They are massive retaliation. That is their strategy. You kill one man, I'll kill 20. Is that our strategy? No, negative. Ours is preventive. Yeah, we are here to ensure peace, not to fight wars. And you ensure peace from a position of strength, from preparedness, defense preparedness, operation readiness. And today we have 120,000 deficiency because no recruit taken in the last 2 years. And now what we have done is we recruit 46,000, then 45,000, 48,000, then 50,000. The next 5 years, the deficiency increased by another 20,000 per year. So by end of 5 years, our deficiency will be more than 10% or 20%, right? So what are we doing? We are cutting the pay and the pension budget. And the Agnipath scheme, very well conceived, because very good this thing, but it does not talk of pension at all.
There is no pension.
Which I think is the motive behind was the pension budget. And that's a fallacy. You pay for your security. If you can't pay for your security, you are asking for trouble. Especially in the Indian context, our security challenges are from stone pelting in the valley to nuclear. That is the sort of a spectrum we're looking for.
Yeah.
So we'll have to have the soldier, the man behind the machine that matters. Technology cannot replace man. And even technology, you can get force multipliers, but force multipliers multiply forces. They do not reduce forces. Right? We need force substitutors. Who's the biggest force substitutor? The man. One Indian soldier is equal to many men across. Let me say that very openly. I think I'll finish for the first time out here. I'll wait for my colleagues to give their views, and of course,
you can come back. Yes, General Kulkarni, you've also, I think you know more about this than you let on to us. So maybe you can, tell us a bit about what the government was perhaps thinking on this scheme. Why bring this in? The points raised by General Bhatia. I love the first point that you said. They decide first and then they think it later.
Priya, reservations, and we wanted to say a lot of things because of our association with the organization for over 40 years. And each one of us always felt whether the regimentation would be affected, would there be dedication, would there be loyalty, would they be committed as much as the soldiers were. And each one of us treated our soldiers more than our own children. And that is where the loyalty came from. And that is why they were willing to sacrifice for the nation. Having said that, now I would say that we put up our reservations and for the last 2 years, this thing has been mulled upon. Whether we were involved or not is a separate issue. But yes, the uniform body won. The veteran body had its own reservation, but the uniform body were debating this issue for the last about 2 years. Now that the government has rolled out this scheme, has said what they want to do it, I think now it's time to see how best can we do of what has been given to us. And that is where the challenges lie. First and foremost, let's not say the uniform body is willing to accept the change. The changes will be resisted. There is no denying the fact. Any change that is introduced will have its own pros and cons. There is no denying the fact. But if the uniform body, the people today feel that yes, this particular Agnipath scheme will give them the youth dividend, will give them the demographic dividend, will ensure loyalty, will ensure dedication, will ensure all the combat potential not being depleted. I think we now have to see how do we go about it. And what General Bhatia said, it is very, very important is the implementation now. The implementation has to be at 2 levels. First, at the government level. Now, the government has rolled out a scheme to say this is the only recruitment way that will be done. There are no 2 ways. It is the Agnipath, the Agniveer will be there. If that be so, then how do we go about it? How do we introduce it? How do we train them at the centers? How do we introduce them into the battalion? How do we ensure that we get the best out of them? And all of that. The second is very important. Since 25% of the people who are going to be joining through this scheme are assured of an employment. There is no denying because 25% will be absorbed. It is the 75% which are going out where the concerns are Would they fall into wrong hand? Would they do something wrong? Because they have come at a very young age, and therefore the need and the kind of environment that is there in the world, as also in our own country, would something go wrong? And that is where we really need to address. And therefore, I would say what General Bhatia was saying, that the government now needs, and that's the second thing which needs to be done, for which I have a certain suggestions to make, which will, as we go along, I'll give the suggestions as to what the government can do. Because it's very, very important, as for me, those 75% after 4 years, they have enough time. It is not just happening tomorrow. It's up to 4 to 5 years. After 90 days, the scheme rolls. After 4 years, we'll have the first lot coming out and being absorbed in as Agniveer, and they're becoming sepoys. So Agniveer is a standalone scheme. It is nothing. They're not ex-servicemen. They are Agniveers, and they become sepoys only after 4 years. And then once they become sepoys, obviously the armed forces are going to be taking total care of them. They will take care of them while they're in the service. They will take care of them when they become sepoys. That's not a problem. The problem is with the 75% which will step into the society. How are they? They are the ambassadors of this Agnipath scheme, because how people see them, how people absorb them, how are they being seen, do they fall into wrong hand? That is where, and therefore, this particular part, this 75%, where the government has to chip in, the industrial body has to chip in, the society has to chip in, everyone has to be, because after all, the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of the nation, it's not just a conventional war, it's a hybrid war situation that herein we are going to be facing. We may not face a conventional war, we may just face few skirmishes here and there, but it is hybrid war, cyber, space, economics, trade, all kinds of things. Where are these people who are going to be absorbed? How are they going to be ensuring the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of the nation as even still being, if not sepoys, still as part of Agniveer and as part of the national ethos? So I think there is a lot that can be done. This scheme has tremendous amount of potential to excel, because obviously we get a youth profile, which otherwise was about 32 years. It comes down to about 26 years. We enjoy the demographic dividend of the country. It's an all India, all class. So the entire nation gets involved into it. All the districts have to be ensured that, each one of them is a competitive exam. So it's an all India competitive exam of those 40,000, 48,000 vacancies that are going to come in. The best are going to be selected. So to see and to say that they will not be good, I think it will be carrying the thing too far. They will.
Okay.
The scheme is only one. That the only entry into the armed forces is only one, and that is the Agnipath scheme. There is no other entry. And if that is so, the best will come. And as we go along, Priya, I'll tell you what I feel are recommendations that I would like to give to make this scheme a great success for the nation.
Let me get Admiral Srikhande also into it. A lot of people see this, Admiral, as, forced conscription in a way, not forced, but a conscription scheme in a way also, to get, the civilians some aspect of the armed forces training. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Thank you, Ms. Sahgal. And add to your question and to the points made by Generals Bhatia and Kulkarni, I would say that firstly, it simply is not conscription by any measure or any understanding of the term. It is an all-volunteer force, as was the previous one, and the Indian Army and the Indian Navy, later the Indian Air Force, have been all-volunteer forces for decades, including in the pre-independence era. So we are now following a different model of an all-volunteer force, that has been announced. So I think in a lot of television discussions I've heard using conscription loosely. It is simply not conscription. It is not the draft that was, or hostilities only, sort of as the term has been used, as happened in the First and Second World War in many countries. In India, it was still a volunteer force because of our population base also. But I would still like to make about 3 or 4 broad points. Firstly, I would say that there is no clear evidence at the national strategic, political, military strategic level of war, and as well as the military strategic level of warfare and the operational and tactical levels of warfare, that one type of organizational or entry or conditions of service or training patterns and even end of service modalities for leaving the service is superior or inferior to the others. I mean, the history of warfare is far more complex than that to say one system is a winning proposition. Why are we doing away with it? We've had reverses there if you go carefully into history, and that's very understandable. I would say that there is no nation or no armed forces in the world which have with certitude won the next war. I mean, it's a sort of contradiction, but I just want to make that point. So there are too many variables, and so therefore there are no simple explanations or context. That a new system could really be called a catastrophe in waiting just to happen, and why fix something if it ain't broke kind of thing. Second one, of course, is that in India we have a very rich tradition of family and cross-generational service in the armed forces, and certainly in the army being a much older service. It has continued over 3 or 4 generations in many cases. I think we should not conflate a tradition of service, with a automatic warfighting competence that is developed. I mean, in any area of life, it is not something genetic that gets passed on. There are certain characteristics which are of course to be celebrated, but I would like to say that esprit de corps, or fighting spirit, it is very important. Sentiments matter, but to conflate some of this with loyalty, or that short service entries will have less loyalty, I think it's probably jumping the gun, because the past offers no evidence, concrete evidence one way or the other. And in fact, in the history of the third point, of course, is that when one goes into the history of the way the army and later the navy were recruited before 1947, and the changes made during the East India Company, and the major changes which were done during General Frederick Roberts' time, or after the 1922 reforms, we find a lot of inconsistencies, incoherence, randomness in the regimental organizations, and haphazard changes which were influenced by biases, which were influenced by racial biases especially, and which suited many aspects of the colonial conditions that existed at that time. So I think the transition to an all India, all class, which the Navy and the Air Force have always been after 1947, is something that we should not dismiss or exaggerate the past, or misinterpret the past. So that said, there are certain apprehensions. I do agree that, and it has been said I think during the press conference also, that there will be individual service specific changes in the models there. The Navy is talking about how they will get continue the naval entry artificer scheme. Now, whether it is done at the end of 4 years, or it will be advanced to 3 years or 2 years, of course, those details will have to be worked out. So there's a lot of work to be done. But I would say that perhaps a lot of work has been done.
Okay.
Then there are aspects about the pension part itself, and savings in pension and resources, etc. I do agree that there ought to be no straight connection between these two. To give you an analogy, I think it may not be fair to say that since railways need to modernize, since railways need to set up a lot of infrastructure, can we have savings in railway pensions, whatever be the conditions of railway pensions? So I think say that the armed forces need to find their own money is probably, I don't know, because I'm just saying this because it has been said this way. Whether that is a driver or not.
That is one of the reasons being given to sell the scheme.
Yes. So I think there are apprehensions, but each service will have to also look at tweaking the system, and we should be open-minded enough. As General Bhatia said, he wishes this scheme a success, and yet we should all be the serving leadership, far more than veterans would. I am assured. I feel that, as always, when veterans were serving and when the current leadership is serving, they will have the best interests in mind and tweak the system accordingly. We'll have
Let's hope for that.
Quality of training. We'll have to make changes in the quality of training because of the reductions in the quantity of.
I'm going to come back to you on that one. That's a good point. But I'm going to come back. We're going to take a short break and continue this conversation with some more points and counterpoints. Hello and welcome back to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. Well, here we were discussing the government's new scheme for the armed forces, the Agnipath. And General Bhatia, you've heard, the discussions also. People are saying that now that is announced, it is up to us to make it a success. Yes and no, because, I totally agree, that it could have been thought a bit more, thought about a bit more. But what do you, the points that were raised by the others, your reaction to those?
I would like to go back to apprehensions, and there's nothing wrong with the apprehensions, because if you don't have apprehensions, if you do not target the obstacles, the drawbacks, then how will we improve upon? How do we make it a success? The main thing in the armed forces is, and we had a number of studies. I was part of the critical committee, so was General Sanjay Kulkarni, 96, and it's been 6 years, still not in the stage of implementation. Before that also, all studies and all projects such like this, transformative or reformative both, are based on 3 T's: no turmoil, no turbulence, and good transition management. Right. So now we have created a turmoil and turbulence, and we don't have a way forward for transition management. The armed forces have to present relevant, they have to future ready. There's no doubt we have to imbibe technologies and we have to optimize our monies, but at the cost of combat effectiveness, negative. At the cost of defense preparedness, negative. At the cost of operational readiness, negative. At the cost of strength, negative. What is our strength? Our strength is the weakest link. Our strength is a soldier. And today the soldier becomes the weakest link. It will break. Every organization the world over, including the most high-tech organizations, the challenge lies in recruitment and induction of quality manpower. You may have the best technology, but recruitment and retention of quality manpower is the biggest challenge. Now, we had a great base for recruitment, right? So we got recruited, there was a man prepared 2 to 3 years to get recruited to the army. You go anywhere around Delhi, you'll find people running on the roads, preparing for the army recruitment. Yeah. The best came to us. Today, why should I come for 4 years? Why should I prepare 2 years and come for 4 years and then get dejected, frustrated back to the society at the mercy of some corporates who will look at the balance sheet? I really don't know. I don't understand this. I will go preferably, and most likely I'll go to the state police. I will go to the CAPF. I will try everything aspect, failing which I'll come for 4 years to work. Failing which, right? So recruitment process remains the same. Recruitment selection remains the same. Recruitment base remains the same. Recruitment criteria remains the same. But what changes is the aspirations of the recruits. No one wants to come for 4 years. Talk to them. Talk to them. Old soldiers are already saying, "Sir, their grandchildren now want to come to the army. Army is very traditional bound. They want to come to the same unit. My son serves in the same unit." Right. So it is not that. So traditions are important, culture is important, and that is now we want to tinker with that. I don't understand that, honestly. We have to look at larger aspects also. Now that it has come, how do we make it a success? Right. We are cutting short our training period. It takes 5 to 6 years for a raw soldier to become part of our team. He doesn't just come into and wear the uniform and after 42 weeks of training the center. No, he has to imbibe the culture and the traditions of a unit. He's part of a team. And one mistake by him can cost the lives of others. He's aware of that. He has to be made aware of that. It is all interlinked. My mistake doesn't cost me my life, it costs me the lives of others also. So we are talking of lives, we're talking of missions. So we'll have to be very careful in our training methodology now. How do we change our training methodology to make sure that it is not knowledge and skill? Our focus is knowledge and skill. 6 months, good for knowledge and skill. No. But where's the attitude? If you look at the training curriculum of organizations, attitude is the longest time taken for attitude. Right? The pride in that organization, the pride in that, the vision and mission of that organization. Similarly for the armed forces. No, the attitude is not going to be there in 4 years. How do I imbibe that? How does that soldier imbibe the attitude of the soldier? Now, technicians, another problem. You think in 4 years a man goes under a tank and he knows how to repair a tank or a ship or an aircraft for that matter? I don't know how in 4 years can he learn the art and the science and the mechanics and the engineering and the technology to maintain and repair aircraft, submarines, ships, weapons, tanks, air vehicles, guns. It doesn't happen. He has to be understudy for 3 to 4 years before he is allowed to touch a spanner. He just didn't come in. And are we going to enroll technology qualified manpower for 4 years, train them, and then throw them out? Are we optimizing our money? Training costs are there. Training costs have to optimize over a length of time. And training is a continuous process. It's on-the-job training, it's formal training, informal training. So just to say I'll train him for 6 months and put him for 3.5 years, he'll be good enough for sentry duties, fine. He'll be good enough for certain duties, low-end duties. But what about high-risk jobs? What about maintenance tasks? What about tasks which need more than profession, a passion?
Okay.
So it's not about passion, it's a motive.
All very good points. I find myself agreeing with General Bhatia more and more, General Kulkarni. So I'll leave it to you to explain and reassure both of us.
Priya, I can only say, very important. First and foremost, is this scheme going to affect the combat potential of the Indian Armed Forces? If it does not, then it's perfectly fine. Now we have to see if this scheme is there, how best do we do? The 25% in any case are part of the armed forces because they are going to be there only. So that's not a problem. It is the feeling and the apprehension that the 75% might just ruin the environment and may not be dedicated, devoted, and might just be passing time and actually be on tour of duty, doing nothing. No duty and only on tour. That is the apprehension. Now how do we stop that apprehension? First and foremost, the government has very clearly said that yes, reforms can be done to this scheme. It is not something written on the stone that this is what it is. And that's a very good thing. And all the reforms to the scheme will be at the level of the Raksha Mantri. So should we find that there are apprehensions coming and things not working out well, so there is a way out. It isn't that, well, this is what it is. So the combat potential of the armed forces is not going to be affected. Secondly, we have to ensure that these 75% who probably just might be on tour on duty and not do anything, it is to ensure that there is something available to them. What does the government and the industry do to chip in? First, as I said, the Home Minister has announced that the Central Paramilitary Forces and the Central Armed Police Forces will absorb them. So we must be sure that 15% vacancies in the Central Armed Police Force will be given to Agnipath first, so that they know that out of 25, now we've added 15%, 100% job. Another 15% vacancies in the state police forces. We've had chief ministers coming forward to say, we will absorb them, not just give them. They will spell out. And their vacancies will not be passed on to anybody other than the Agniveers who are going out. So 15% get absorbed in the state police forces. 15% vacancies will be given in Group C and D in the government of India for these. So you find that 70-odd% people know for sure that should they not get absorbed within the armed forces, there is an opportunity given to them in elsewhere. The industry needs to come forward to say, we will absorb them, for which the industry must set up in all the district next to the district magistrate called the Agniveer Skill Development and Employment Center. So the skill development employment centers in every district that comes next to the district magistrate or the district commissioner, the responsibility of the industry to ensure that at least a balance of them are there. Then they are as good and as equated as the NCCC certificate. So the Indira Gandhi Open University in these 4 years, since their 10th or 12th or whatever the qualification is, entitles them to become graduates over a period of time, for which they've been given Seva Nidhi. I'll be a little more stricter and firmer. No Agniveer should get married. The Seva Nidhi must be given to the Agniveer as he is unmarried. So to say that, invariably these boys will and the girl married houses, as long as he does not get the Seva Nidhi, after he gets his 12 lakhs, he can get married. We are not concerned. But while in service and while before that, they will remain unmarried so that their commitment remains there and they know they are there to improve their own career, to improve their future, and at the same time serve the nation with pride. If we see that they are equivalent of NCC certificate, within the battalion.
Got it. I'll just get Admiral for the last word. Sorry to cut you short, but you reassured a lot of our points.
I would say that counter some from the naval perspective of what General Bhatia was saying, that the mentoring that takes place right now, the training from learning from seniors, is something that will continue happening. It was always so. In the old system, no sailor came to a ship, ready for any challenges, any repairs. He learned on the job. He learned from seniors. He was supervised by seniors, both senior sailors as well as officers, people more experienced. So currently, 90% after a year or two, 90% of those people will remain, and it will go on, reducing. But these people who are coming for the four-year 4-year tenure will learn a set of skills. 25% of those will be retained and promoted and further trained. So it's not as if these aspects have probably not been thought of. There will be challenges. There will be challenges for training and development of competence. There may be challenges for aspects of commitment. But those have been seen in various recruitment systems also. So there are no clear answers, and I would say that we should not exaggerate some of the aspects of the old system because the record in any country, in any system, is mixed, and therefore the entire thing, all the holes need to be aligned actually to do well at the national strategic level, and that is what we should aim for. Instead of giving too much weightage to the old system as critical for results, or the new system as critical for results or disaster in the making.
Okay. On that note, I think a lot of pertinent questions have been raised, and well, some have been answered, some still remain. But it's, as we said, it's a new scheme, is going to be worked out. The Defense Ministry has said it's open to suggestions, and we do hope that will be taken into account also. Shows like this, discussions like this. But thank you all for your points of view, and thank you all for watching the show. Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.